Okay. Hey everyone, welcome back to Onyx Pages. We are at the West Beach off of Lake Ontario, and yes, it has been a very long time since I've reviewed a book. And you'll remember that in a previous video I asked you to let me know what book you might be interested in hearing a review of, and the big winner was Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. And this is actually going to be the first review that I've done on this channel for the year, and definitely the first review that I've done since revising the 7 cowrie shell rating system. This was a really hard book to review for a number of reasons. Number one, everybody was so hyped about Tomi Adeyemi's Children of Blood and Bone. She was on nighttime television. You know, there was a lot of marketing around the book, and honestly, I felt a little bit intimidated. I didn't want to get the book review wrong. I wanted to make sure that I was sticking to the 7 cowrie shell system and that I wasn't being influenced by the emotions that I felt when I read the book, or that I wasn't unfairly comparing Children of Blood and Bone against other books written by more experienced writers. So as a result of all of the insecurities that I had about reviewing the book, and I guess also I should add, many booktubers loved Children of Blood and Bone. It was a complete love fest. I think I maybe saw 1 or 2 videos where people were lukewarm about it, and I don't recall ever seeing a video where somebody completely didn't like the book. So I was about to review it, and then I decided to read it again. So I read it again over Audible just to make sure that my feelings were consistent and that I was being as fair and comprehensive as possible. So here is my review of Children of Blood and Bone. So in Children of Blood and Bone, we follow a cast of characters. It's written from the point of view of about 4 characters, but the main one is Zelly. Zelly is she's a diviner. She lives in a land called Orisha, and Orisha has a really difficult history when it comes to magical people. There was a group of people called diviners who had access to magic through their symbiotic relationship with the gods, and because they started to abuse their powers, the gods kind of punished them by removing their magical powers. And when that happened, they were so weak that another class of people were able to effectively engage in a genocide against this community, effectively marginalizing them and oppressing them, so that not only did they not have access to their magical powers, but they were no longer allowed to even remember their powers, remember their history, remember their language. Very, very classic kind of genocidal experience. So in this world, we've got you know, this lighter skinned rich group of people called the Kosiran, and then another group of people who have been down pressed by that kingdom. So Zelly is part of the community that's been down pressed, but still she does have a connection to her magical history, right? She is a diviner. This is a spoiler, but she eventually becomes a magi, and throughout the book she realizes that magic isn't actually dead. I'll just say it was just oppressed, right? I can't really say more about that story without spoiling everything for you. So that's the plot, but there are a number of different subplots in the story, and I'll tell you more about that later. Other people have probably done a really good job of providing a synopsis of this story, and I don't think that the plot is what for me is most important to talk about. I think overall the story of Children of Blood and Bone is really important because in addition to giving us a really strong, not always strong, but giving us a strong picture of what it means for a young Black girl to discover that she can actually reclaim her power, reclaim her heritage, and reclaim her magic, and bring it back to her people. Outside of that, which in and of itself is a very empowering story, it also has a number of other themes. Zelly struggles with imposter syndrome, which all of us, I think, can identify with. There's a character who is a prince. he has been taught to hate magic. He has been taught to hate Zelly's people. But throughout the story, he starts to realize that he has magic within him. So he's dealing with self-hate and trying to physically repress the power and the magic within him. And this creates a dissonance within him that is really interesting to watch. We also see a character, a princess who grew up in royalty with privilege, who was taught to see Zelly's people as less than. And we see her develop, learning the truth about magic, the truth about the violence of her oppressive king father. And we see her trying to position herself as an ally to this community that has been oppressed. We also meet a community of resistors, people who never lost their magic, but had to hide away in the woods and create a community where they could thrive and survive. But we see that community eventually get destroyed. But the fact that it existed in the first place really tells a story of resistance. So there's so much here in this story to love. Like a lot of debut novels, it was a bit hastily put together in parts. And I don't agree with some of the choices that Adeyemi made, which I will get into in a moment. But I think it's an important contribution to our literature. I'll say that. Okay, so as you know, I revamped the 7 cowrie shell system, so I'm going to be using this for the first time. I also have to give a shout out to Tomi, my Tomi, who's on the other side of the camera, who's being very patient with me as we are both getting eaten by mosquitoes out here. So thanks, Tomi. Yes, the cover art was obviously very beautiful. Okay, so let me tell you about my rating of Children of Blood and Bone after reading it twice. So the first question in the 7 cowrie shell system relates to world building. Describe the world. Does it engage power inequities? How does it advance the conditions of African descended people? Whose needs are met? And is this a world that I would want to live in? So in terms of world building, I would rate the world building in Children of Blood and Bone with half a cowrie shell. So definitely the world deals with class, it deals with color. There are firecrackers off in the distance, don't mind that. Gender. So the world deals with a lot of different kinds of inequalities. I think the most prominent one is that between communities that have access to wealth and power, and using race as a way to keep other communities down. So I think that is that's really important, and that's the main power imbalance that we see. Unfortunately, there are other power imbalances that could have been explored more that weren't. So I feel that gender and gender identity could have been explored more here in the story, and in my view, it wasn't. Sexual orientation to my recollection, is not even raised. I think most of the romances are, I believe that they're all heterosexual, and I believe that all of the characters are cisgender. So it doesn't really get us into more social inequities than I think it could have. There also is an interesting magical system that is loosely based off of the Orisha. So if you're a follower of Ifa, and I know that some folks in the booktube community are, you'll notice that some of the deities that are mentioned are deities that are worshipped in the Ifa tradition. So we hear of Oya, we hear of Orunmila, we hear of a different Orisha. The land is also called Orisha. So I think when I first read the story, I felt like the treatment of the Orisha and that magical system was not as respectful as it could have been. It really, to me, seemed as though Adeyemi wasn't really as familiar as she could have been with like the ancient system of the ancient cosmologies that are associated with Ifa. So that was a little bit challenging for me when I first read the book. And there are other books that I think did a better job. Sorry, there are other books that I think do a better job of explaining and exploring the power of the Orisha. So for example, the Black God's drums, most of Nalo Hopkinson's early works, for example, She Would Be King in some ways, House of Whispers by Nalo Hopkinson. Like, there are a number of books that I think do a better job of teaching us about the Orisha, and I think what Adeyemi does is borrow from the cosmology and then, you know, sprinkle it into the world that she built. And I would have liked something that was a little bit closer to the actual cosmology and something that was a little bit more comprehensive. So I would say also, in terms of world building and inequality, there's a huge theme of rising up, right? We will get our magic back and we will rise up. And that rising up, that collective communal rising up, was really important, a really important aspect of world building, and also really important for me as a reader. So I did give half a cowrie shell for world building. The second is characters. And so for characters, I'm asking, are the characters well developed? Are the characters intersectional in identity? Are there LGBTQ identified characters? And are the characters that we hear from in the story the ones that I most want to hear from myself as a reader? So in terms of characters, we learned the most, I think, about Zeli and Amani. Zeli, the main character, and Amani, the princess. And I think that those two characters are fairly well developed. We get inside their heads, we learn about their challenges, their woes, we learn about their hero's journey as they go through the plot. But then there are other characters that I would have liked to learn more about, get into their head more, like the king, for example, or Inan, or Tizan, or a number of other characters. And I do feel that there is a bit of an imbalance as to which characters we got to understand and which characters that we didn't. And I think this comes through the most when we look at the community of diviners and magi's who lived in the woods. We didn't really learn a lot about how they got there, how they were able to survive, how they created that community, and what their hopes and dreams were. We only got a snippet of that information, and that actually was what I would have liked to see more of. As I prepared for this review, I realized that the most marginalized in this book was not Zeli and her family. It was actually the community that was out in the woods that no one really knew was still there. And that community we didn't really hear a lot about, and it actually got destroyed in the story. So I gave half a cowrie shell for characters for that reason. The third cowrie shell is for point of view. So describe the points of view from which the story is told. Is the story told from the point of view of the most marginalized characters? Is the point of view the one that I most need to hear from? And did I learn something valuable from this point of view? So I gave half a cowrie shell for point of view, again, for similar reasons as to what I just described in the characters. The most marginalized community was the one I heard the least about. And not only am I talking about the community of folks in the woods, I'm also talking about the one leftover sort of ancestor sorcerer that lived in a cave who also dies. We don't really learn as much as we could have about him. So for me as a reader, I really enjoy reading stories about marginalized people who find their power and who are able to survive. And even if they don't survive, I like to hear about their attempts to do so. And unlike, you know, if you think about the Broken Earth series, we really got a rich development of all the different communities. N.K. Jemisin really explored each story and gave it all to us so that we could choose which one we really wanted to follow. Here, I think in Children of Blood and Bone, we're really encouraged to focus on Zeli and focus on her journey, I think to the detriment of a number of other stories that I think might have been a little bit more compelling. So that's half a cowrie shell for point of view. Relevance is the next one. So relevance is really focused on conflicts. Describe the conflicts, themes, and problems in the story. Is the conflict, theme, or problem thoroughly examined? Is the conflict, theme, or problem relevant to me? Does the conflict, theme, or problem invite an important change? At the end of the story, Adeyemi has a chapter where she really talks about what her motivation was for writing this book, and she focuses on police brutality. She focuses on the Black Lives Matter movement, and really develops this theme and makes a connection between Zelly's journey of recognizing her connection to her past and to her power, and realizing that even though she's been told that she can't activate her magic anymore, and even though there's a system that's designed to keep her magic down, to keep her people poor and oppressed and disconnected from their past, that she can still find a way, and not only a way, but a new way to become powerful. Adeyemi analogizes that with the challenges and the violence experienced by Black folks in North America, and I think that's a strong and important comparison to make. So I think that main conflict is relevant. And there are other ones, sub-conflicts, that were also relevant. Like I mentioned, the imposter syndrome that Zelly has, the self-hate that Inan has, the struggle with becoming an ally and not knowing exactly what this is that Amari has, and all of the main characters really trying to figure out what we don't like the state that we're in right now. How do we create something new? And what does it mean for us to be responsible for creating something new? I think that's a powerful and important, those were powerful and important conflicts as well. And they were relevant to me. So in terms of relevance, I gave a full cowrie shell for relevance. Options. Number 5, describe the possible solutions offered in the story. Do the options themselves challenge inequality? Do the chosen options lead to a more just world? Have I learned something valuable from the choice? Here I gave half a cowrie shell for options. The options I think that were placed in front of the main characters were, do we accept that magic is gone and that we're down pressed? No, that wasn't chosen. 2, do we create an uprising against the powerful class? That was another option. 3, do we create some sort of hybrid system? And I think the story sort of ends with this big battle, a battle where we see that the king loses and there's this promise of a new day, a new experience. And I really like that Adeyemi chose that as the ending place of Children of Blood and Bone, and I think the starting place of the sequel, Children of Virtue and Vengeance, or Vengeance and Virtue. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that option gets developed. But there was again an option that I think was really important, which was to look at how the people who actually did survive, how they might have played a greater role in the end game and in creating something new. And maybe we're going to see that in the sequel, and I'm going to read the sequel to look out for remnants of that story. So I did give half a cowrie shell for options. The next element was, Tomi, how you doing? You good? The next element is otherworldly elements. So describe the otherworldly elements in the story. Do they challenge power inequities? Do they cause me to reflect? Were they awesome and super cool? A full cowrie shell for this one, because I really like the way that Adeyemi explored magic. So we have channeling, we have ancestor reverence, we've got talismans, we have spooky caves with like magical pictures, we've got sorcerers, we've got time travel, we have the dream world, we have a little bit of like passion, we've got like sword fighting and being able to hold another spiritual entity in your mind and be guided by that. We've got ghosts. We have magical animals. Like really, her magical exploration was so rich. I really, really enjoyed that I got to see so many different examples of power, even like how each of the different clans were able to use their own power. So there are 10 clans. They have power over different elements of nature, and their powers are experienced, and they look different. Like the burners like turn into flames, and they can like burn themselves and others, right? Like just really interesting superpowers. So I thought she did a really great job there, and I'm looking forward to seeing that on film, because we are going to see Children of Blood and Bone on the screen eventually. So full cowrie shell for otherworldly elements. And the last to Tomi's pure joy, the last cowrie is the overall reading experience. And I would give a full cowrie shell for this. And overall, the question is, how did I enjoy the book? Was it enjoyable? Was it engaging, edifying, entertaining? It definitely was entertaining. I had fun reading it. I had fun listening to it. I'm looking forward to seeing it on screen and seeing the adaptation of it. I'm looking forward to the sequel, so full cowrie shell for that. One thing that I will say that I missed in the character cowrie is one of the things that I found really difficult about this story was that, I don't know if y'all noticed this, but Amari, the princess, has a servant named Binta, and she witnesses Binta's murder. This is where she realizes that her father has such hatred towards diviners, right? But when I read through the book, like, Amari loves Binta, right? She loves her with her heart and soul. They were gonna live together. She talks about her with so much passion and so much near romance, right? So when I was reading the story, I was like, is Amari in love with Binta? Is Binta in love with Amari? Like, did their passion as friends transcend into something more? Because it sounded like that to me. But then we have this weird love between Zeli and Inan. Inan was raised to hate and want to kill, and he actually spends half of the story trying to kill Zeli. And then Zeli hates him, and then they fall in love. Like, there's this weird insta romance. It's like, I could kill you, or I could like make love to you in the dreamscape. And when I hold those two relationships up against each other, I just couldn't believe either of them. I couldn't believe that Zeli and Inan fell in love. I didn't see, it just wasn't convincing to me. And it also wasn't convincing to me that Amari and Binta didn't have something that was more than a friendship. Obviously a messed up one, because Binta is Amari's servant, and that's oppressive. But I couldn't believe the romances. There was insta love on one side, and then there seemed to be like some weird, like, we're not queer activity on the other side. And together I was just like, work on that. So I wanted to share that with you as well. All right, that is my review of Children of Blood and Bone. I think that the story really opened up a lot of people to Afrofuturism and to the Orisha, and I think it made a significant contribution to the literature. I think that there were opportunities that were missed that I hope get corrected. And I've read a lot of debut novels, and this one was all right. But I want to see more from Adeyemi, and I want to see more focus on a tighter plot. I'd like to see more developed characters, and I'd like to see this idea that she started, which is that we can rise up and our connection to the past can be a powerful one. I'd like to see more of that in her sequel. Okay, those are my thoughts, possibly an unpopular opinion. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.